channel. This is Psychic Medium Raymond Guzman, and I know that I haven't been doing a lot of celebrity readings, but for those of you that are not aware, I am working on my third book. It's called Starseed Footprints. This is to be out later. This, I believe in August, I should have it out, ready for pre-order, and also available for order, so stay tuned for more details. But that's the reason I had kind of stayed away from doing some of the celebrity readings. Today I'm going to be doing a mediumship reading on Miss Whitney Houston. This was highly, highly requested from a lot of my viewers and people who just tune into my channel. So I want to thank you so much, and I hope I do justice to her memory and to her soul, her beautiful soul, when I do this reading. And I will start off by saying that I am a huge fan. I was going to say was, but I still am a huge fan of Miss Whitney Houston and her voice. There will never be another Whitney Houston. There will never be someone that had the impact in our culture as she did with a lot of our generations. So many people now, so many artists that are coming onto the scene emulate her. They do covers of her songs still for auditions, and so she's had such a huge impact in the music industry, regarding her, her career and all her achievements and her accolades that she had throughout her time here. So when I get into Whitney Houston's soul, what I'm getting from her soul and what is coming through immediately is that Whitney was someone who was destined for stardom. We all know that. She was destined. She had a voice that was so unique, and she was going to be successful in that whole mindset. But the Whitney that we saw towards her passing and the Whitney that, when she started her career are two different people. Meaning that Whitney, when she first started, got into this music industry at a very young age. There was this excitement, this honeymoon phase, so to speak, that a lot of, celebrities and artists have in their careers. And I feel like she was, going into it and working extremely hard at a very young age and enjoying everything about it. And she was just so lighthearted and just so different than the Whitney that she evolved into. And I'll explain what I'm getting at. So the Whitney that began at a very young age was someone who was more carefree, more of a free soul. She was just enjoying every aspect of her fame and her music. Music was everything to her, but also, just having fun with her friends. She felt more freedom at that time in the 80s, when she was first starting off. But then as things evolved and she got involved with Bobby Brown, which I'll go into the other slide in a minute, things changed with her and there was more pressure. The thing that a lot of people don't understand is that when you have a voice like Whitney had, I mean, there's a lot of singers out there, but Whitney sang, I mean, she could sing. Like, she could really, really sing. And when you have a voice like that that's so unique and you've broken so many records at a very young age, it almost puts this immense amount of pressure on the celebrity artists. And so they can, have all this pressure. And I feel from her souls like she was having a lot of this pressure and she dealt with it in different ways. But for Whitney, it slowly became into a depressive state. She didn't feel like she had the privacy that she wanted. Her life was always scrutinized. Everybody had something to say about her. Everyone had an opinion about her life. And Whitney was someone who she didn't really need paparazzi or want them in her life. And she didn't really appreciate people commenting about her life, and their speculations, because only she was living her life and she knew exactly what was going on. So this kind of was like years in the making, and her record company, I feel like they were very supportive of her career, but they kept pushing her and pushing her and pushing her like a machine. And she would just handle the pressure. So the way that she handled it was almost like she went into a depressive state of mind. And I feel like she battled, with that, and also with some weight issues. I also feel like her relationship with her family wasn't the best, and I'll get into that with her mom, Sissy Houston. in a separate slide once I get to Bobby first. But there was so many factors, and I also feel like the management, the guy that was in charge of Whitney's career, I don't feel like he was a very good influential person on her career. Yes, he got her to the level of success, but I feel like there was a lot of negative energy coming from that particular person. I feel like she wasn't the happiest, and she made it known to him. And there was a turning point in her career where he stopped believing in her, and I feel like she wasn't promoted as much by her record company, and she wasn't, given a lot of, of the spotlight like she would have, had in the beginning of her career. So things became volatile, for Whitney. She did go through a spiritual awakening during, the mid part of her career, and I feel like this is where she took that trip to, I believe it was Israel or Jerusalem. She went to one of those. I can't remember. I remember seeing it on TV. I was at a younger age, and I think I was in my teens when she did that. But she did turn to her spirituality and to her faith to get her through a rough period. I also feel like when she got in, let me get into the next slide here. When she got into a relationship with Mr. Bobby Brown, I don't feel like it was the best relationship. She had this initial, phase where she was almost like under a spell in many ways, and fell for his charm. And so it became almost like a very, platonic type of relationship. And I feel like he was such sweet charmer, he loved her a lot, but things became erratic. And this is where I feel like she started evolving and getting into a negative, um, or a darker phase in her life, and experimenting with substances and things that would have ultimately played a role, in her passing. And I'll get into that later. But I feel like, for the most part, she was hurt a lot in this relationship. She was almost in the place of denial. She didn't want to see things for what they were. I do feel like he's the one that actually initiated and got Whitney hooked to a lot of, of the bad habits or tendencies that she had. And it wasn't something that, because she was a good girl, and I feel like she wasn't like that in the beginning of her career. A lot of the people that, she fell in love with, which was Bobby, and a lot of his friends and people that she would have been around would have been doing a lot of this, these things, and having these parties, and doing, substances, and things like that. And slowly she became very glued to that, to the point where it became almost impossible to get out of that, and it took a toll on her health. And I feel like, there was things in this relationship that were volatile. There was definitely no loyalty coming, from him. I feel like they did, actually they both at one time actually would have, had affairs outside of the relationship. But they wouldn't have, speculated a lot on Whitney, but I do feel like she did, actually, as a retaliation, would have had some kind of affair outside of the relationship, even if it was just, a one night stand and whatnot. But I get that from her soul, that she doesn't, when she looks back, she has no regrets in what she's done. She realizes that she'll always love Bobby Brown. There was always, even when, everything happened in their, in the relationship, she was always one of the ones to try to make it work. But I feel like there was domestic abuse as well as verbal and mental abuse. Just it's very painful for me to even kind of tune into this, but these are the raw facts that I'm getting from her soul and from spirit regarding Whitney. And this all led to her having almost like a mental breakdown and a spiritual breakdown, where she became almost violent in a lot of her interviews, and a lot of the things, that people were saying in the tabloids. I almost feel like when she was in her own confines of her own home, she was constantly cussing people out, and always just, having this, like, how do they, like she would say, why are they commenting on my life? They don't know anything about me. Who are they to be talking about me? And I feel like there was this level of frustration that she had, because, she really wanted her privacy, and she really wanted people to stop bothering her. But at every turn, she had no privacy. I also feel that during this relationship, her health was not the best. I do feel like she may have suffered from anorexia, but it was something maybe that, she didn't really talk about. And this was partly due to the substances and changes in her body. I do feel like she would have been lethargic all the time, having trouble getting up in the morning, trouble sleeping, insomnia. She would have, just had a lot of changes in character, some memory loss at certain times. And I feel like it's almost like she was in this whirlwind of clouds that she really couldn't, get out of. Uh, and there was brief moments when she tried to, during this relationship, to get sober and to just get better, for the sake of her career. And I feel like Bobby did, was a positive advice at one time for her. And once he got help and he realized that he had a problem too, but you know, them together was almost like, I really feel like there were twin flames, not soulmates. And so with twin flames, and this is something that I'm discussing in my book as well, it's a very volatile situation. They have so many similarities, but at the same time, it becomes so toxic. And one of the, of the twin flames tries to chase the other, and it becomes this chase and run type of situation where ultimately one or both become hurt, and things just don't work out at all. And of course, they had Bobby Christina, and that changed a lot of things for Whitney. She thought, at that time when she had Bobby Christina, that things would change between her and Bobby, and that he would, change his ways and really, settle down and just be more responsible for things, and be more present for her. Because I feel like she was almost abandoned, almost, even though they were still together when they had Bobby Christina. I just feel like there was just so much pain and so much distance that, between them. It wasn't something where it unified them. It actually was the opposite to what, people reported in the tabloids. And, they said, oh, Bobby and Whitney are, lovebirds. Are so close together and unified with this pregnancy and this birth of their child. But I feel it was quite the opposite. Actually, he was, more not present for her. In retrospect, when I tune into his soul, since he's still living, I do get that he has regrets. He does have a lot of pain. This is not something that's very easy for him to talk about. Yes, he's made some peace within his soul, but he just didn't feel, he doesn't feel good when he thinks about everything that he's done. He has a lot of regrets. He wishes that he could still see Whitney. He still loves Whitney with all his heart. I feel like that love is always going to be there for her soul. And again, I feel like they were twin souls, twin flames. I don't feel like they were soulmates. And this is where a lot of the problems stemmed. And, Whitney, I do feel like there was a point where she would have been suicidal as well. But I don't feel like she would have acted out on that either. It was just a darker period when she was with Bobby, trying to kind of get his attention, letting him know that she was crying out for help, she needed help. So she became very strong and very strong-willed, and I feel like she evolved into this very powerful, strong woman. But at the same time, behind that strength, there was a lot of pain. And how do you cope with pain? A lot of people turn to dependencies. They turn to food. If you have food cravings, they turn to alcohol, to smoking, to substances. In her case, it would have been substances and alcohol. And I feel like these two things were very volatile for her health and for her mind and body and soul. I also feel like, again, her record company would have abandoned her at this time that she was going through a rough, instead of being supportive, I feel like they were quite the opposite in, trying to put pressure on her, making her feel inferior, worse than what she already felt. And she just felt alone and confused. I just get that it was it was an awful situation. In the time that she was with Bobby, the time with her record company, there was a lot of ups and downs, discussions, arguments. I see her having arguments and discussions with a lot of people at the record company over the phone, slamming the phone down heavily, throwing things across the wall. This is the kind of the behavior that she, would have had. I see visions of it because she was pissed off. I mean, you would be pissed off too if it was someone that, that you signed a record deal with, and they are supposed to be there as a guiding force to promote you and to help you, and then they just turn their back, all of a sudden, for no reason on you, and then your name is being dragged through the tabloids, and they're not doing anything. Your publicist is not doing anything. Your record company is not doing anything to stop it, but rather encouraging that kind of behavior. That's what I kind of get from her soul and what was going on. I do feel like there was someone, this would have been a female, that would have been a friend to Whitney. I feel she was African American as well, and she told her to beware of who she put her trust in. That's what's coming through very strong. Like, she was warned to be careful with who she would have trusted, because I feel like there was a lot of foul play in her passing. I don't feel that Whitney passed from cardiac, like they stated, and drowning in a tub. And I'll get into that in a couple of minutes. But Spirit is basically saying that she knew, and there was a new relationship that she was forming with someone as well. So there was somebody else in Whitney's life before her passing. I don't know if this is something that was made public, but it feels like she would have had somebody else, and her mind and soul was thinking already, was out of, she was already getting better and sober. That's the kind of energy that I get from her, that she was making a comeback and she was really sober. I don't get her soul being hooked on drugs or substances at all before her passing. So I feel like she was told, by someone to beware of who she put her trust in. And I see a new relationship that would have been, you know, starting. But Whitney was someone who, very stubborn. You can't tell her anything. She would have, listened to her own voice and kind of given you sass if you try to give her any kind of advice that was unsolicited or anything that she would not have wanted to hear. So she felt like almost that she was safe from, and not, there wasn't anything to worry about. But there was some jealousy. There was definitely some jealousy from another female. So I'm getting that there was a female who was jealous of Whitney. And I get that it would have been a situation where, this other female would have been very jealous of her and would have set things into motion. There's a lot of anger from this female energy that I'm getting. They knew something about Whitney. This could have been like a rivalry. I feel like before her passing, there was an argument with a female about this male that she was interested in, and there would have been some kind of argument that went back and forth. It wasn't a good situation, but I feel like Whitney didn't believe, that something bad would happen to her. But again, when I get into all of this, I see that there was a lot of cover-up. There was a lot of foul play. She did not die from what they are stating in the autopsy. I feel like it was all provoked, and I'll get into that in just a minute. Towards her passing, I feel like she was daydreaming a lot. Not the day that she passed, but weeks before. I feel like she had a lot of plans. She was thinking a lot about her future, and I feel like she was also doing acting, and so she was thinking a lot more about acting and getting into that, and kind of deviating a little bit away from the music, because the music became something so volatile, like I said, and they were not supportive of her, so it was almost like this whole situation where she would have let her intentions be known. She was going, she was very verbal, and she would have had communication with her record company and told them, she wasn't going to do this, she wasn't going to do that, but there was a lot of darkness, a lot of resistance, a lot of evil surrounding Whitney, where she would have been a prime target. And again, her passing would have been staged, and it would have been a foul play. I don't get that she would have passed from that. I feel like she was given substances in her system, hours before, and this would have been somebody that was a male close to her that day that she was, found, that would have administered this to her. And again, she was in that position where they said that she drowned, but the body, I don't feel like it was there. I actually feel like her body was somewhere else, and it was moved into that place. Somehow it was moved in there, in that tub or wherever they found her, but it wasn't there. I'm being actually shown a different room in a different building, not even in the same building. So I feel like she was actually killed somewhere else, and this would have been, it feels like foul play. It feels like there were several people involved, but there was really a female that was involved in all of this that had a lot of jealousy, and then again, I feel like there was a male also who would have been supportive and would have carried this out, this evil act out. And I don't feel like they've been caught. I feel like there was a lot of cover up. These people are people who have power and position. Um, and it makes me sick to my stomach when I tune into it. I actually feel something on my head when I tune into Whitney, and I do feel like on the left side she would have had the the fact that they said she had a weak heart. That is true. That part is true. She did have a weak heart because I feel like, my breathing, but I feel almost like what I get is like my head is being pushed, and I hit, when I hit the ground, I feel like it's something hit me on the left side of my head. I also feel this like on my neck, this tightness, like a strangulation of sorts. So I feel like she was. I hate to say this, but I feel like she was strangled. In what I'm getting from spirit, and when as a medium, I take on a lot of, as a physical medium, I take on a lot of um, the the effects. When I'm channeling spirit and I'm channeling her soul, I take on however they would have passed. That's what I'm getting. I feel an impact on the back of my head. It feels very instantaneously. I feel my neck almost like a strangulation, asphyxiation. Um, but again, I don't feel like she was in that position as in that room when that happened. Again, a lot of cover up and a lot of foul play. Um, it feels like, also that she, there was some news that she was going to be receiving. This would have been maybe about 2 or 3 weeks before, but she kept this private. I don't know exactly what the news was, but it feels like it was almost centered around her, her money and her career, and almost maybe even signing with a new record company. It was just something, I feel like she was receiving some kind of news. It was at the last minute, and I just feel like this whole thing of taking her out was to prevent her from making those changes that she was going to implement before her passing. This could have also been around the rights to her music, but there was a lot of foul play. The people that I get that would be responsible were very close to her. That's what I'm going to say. So they would have been involved in music. Could they have been involved in the record company? I will let that be something that you kind of set with and make your own assumptions, and that's all I'm going to say. But I feel that there was definitely a lot of foul play, a lot of jealousy from another female who was just jealous of Whitney and her relationship with another male that she would have had. Um, it's just a very sad situation. It makes me very sad. I'm going to get into the next slide here. This is Miss Sissy Houston, and I feel like her mom, was a gentle soul, but at the same time, she showed tough love towards Whitney. And so I don't know anything about their relationship, but what I'm receiving from Whitney's soul is that it wouldn't have been the perfect mom and daughter type of relationship. I do feel like Whitney at a certain point felt like she, made her mom ashamed, or she didn't live up to the standard that she would have liked to for her mom, Sissy. But I feel like, Sissy was someone who kind of let her daughter, go on. She was protective of her in the beginning. She really didn't want her to, venture off into this, but she saw that this became Whitney's dream and career. So she really, and even she didn't, I don't feel like she approved of the relationship with Bobby. It was something where Sissy would have told her, this is not good. This is not a good environment for you. But Whitney was stubborn, very in her own element, so she wouldn't have paid attention. But I feel like the relationship was kind of rocky. Whitney didn't like to hear, like I said, other people giving her advice, and even if it was her own mom, her mom was not going to sugarcoat anything. She would have told her how things were, and so I feel like this is where a lot of the problems stemmed from. But the message for Miss Sissy Houston is to know that her daughter will always love her, and she is with Bobby Christina. They are together. They are okay. There's peace. She does love everyone. And that's just the message that I'm getting for her family. There was a lot of things also with Whitney and her cousin. Um, you know, a lot of things that Whitney now, sees as foolishness and things that, could have been avoided. She ultimately wishes that the family would have been closer, in a certain level. But again, there's a lot of jealousy that would have been coming from other family members towards Whitney because Whitney had attained a certain level of success. So, ultimately, for those of you that are still Whitney Houston fans, know that her soul's at rest. She is at peace. She loves each and every one of you, and every tribute, every song out there is keeping her soul alive and very present. She will always continue to be an icon, and at some point she will be reincarnating. I do feel like that is going to actually happen, and so will Bobby Christina, and it will be both of them reincarnating. I don't know if this will happen at the same time, but I do feel like that is actually something that's going to happen, within the next 50 years or so. So it is something that is definitely going to happen. So I want to thank you all for tuning in. This was my mediumship reading on Miss Whitney Houston. Blessings and love and light, and may Whitney Houston live on. Thank you.